One day, Naomi decided to take Lily to an upscale restaurant, expecting the usual admiration from others and a display of control over her child. When Kevin, a calm and confident black waiter, approached their table, Naomi smirked, dripping with sarcasm, and said, "Talk to my deaf and mute daughter," laughing as if she were about to humiliate him in front of everyone. But what happened next stunned the entire restaurant. Kevin's reaction was so unexpected, so perfectly poised and full of kindness, that it left Naomi speechless and every patron frozen in awe. The story that unfolded from that moment would change all their lives in ways no one could have imagined. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story really began. Naomi Whitmore sat upright at the edge of the pristine white linen table, the polished silverware reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier above. The restaurant, a haven for those who measured success in delicate entrees and imported wines, seemed to bow in silent deference to her presence. She smoothed the folds of her designer dress with meticulous care, a faint smirk playing on her lips as she glanced at her daughter. Lily, small and slight, sat across from her, her wide eyes observing the surroundings with quiet curiosity, completely absorbed in the gentle glint of sunlight bouncing off the glassware. Naomi had always regarded her daughter not as a child to nurture, but as an accessory to display something rare, precious, and cumbersome all at once. Lily's deafness, her inability to conform to the world's spoken rules, seemed to irritate Naomi more than it softened her heart. The little girl's hands rested neatly on the table, poised but idle, a subtle tension in her shoulders betraying both longing and uncertainty. Lily's brown eyes, dark and luminous, flicked briefly toward the window, where the city's energy pulsed in sharp contrast to the sterile calm of the restaurant. The hum of quiet conversations and clinking glasses seemed distant, muffled, a world her ears could not touch, a world that made her mother restless. Naomi's gaze hardened as she followed her daughter's gentle movements. The thought of managing this child so delicate, so silent, so dependent, sparking a familiar cocktail of irritation and entitlement. Kevin approached, his tall frame moving with the calm assurance of someone accustomed to attention, yet unbothered by the invisible judgments that hovered like dust motes in the air. He wore the crisp uniform of the restaurant with understated elegance. The black vest over a white shirt, sleeves perfectly pressed, and the faint scent of polished cologne mingling with the aroma of baked bread and truffle oil. His presence carried quiet authority, an unspoken promise that no child would ever be ignored in his care. Naomi's smirk deepened, sharp as a blade. "You can start with my daughter's order," she said, her tone of venomous lilt dripping with sarcasm. "Go ahead, talk to my deaf and mute child." The words rolled out, calculated, designed to sting. She laughed, an abrupt, hollow sound that bounced off the high ceilings, expecting Kevin to flinch, to falter under the pressure of her mockery. Kevin crouched slowly, deliberately, bringing himself to Lily's eye level. His expression remained calm, warm, welcoming, a stark contrast to the harshness radiating from Naomi. His hands moved fluidly, signing with perfect clarity. "Hi, Lily. I'm Kevin. What would you like today?" For the first time, Lily's eyes sparked with genuine interest. Her small fingers danced in response, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. "Mac and cheese, please," she signed, her movements precise, yet carrying a tremor of excitement that spoke volumes more than her words ever could. Naomi's laughter faltered, the carefully constructed mask of superiority cracking. Her lips tightened and a vein of fury colored her expression, the kind of visceral shock that arises when control slips unexpectedly from one's grasp. She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping faintly against the polished floor. "Manager, now!" Her voice, once casual, now trembled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The restaurant manager appeared almost instantly, a man whose face bore the practiced serenity of someone used to mediating the egos of both guests and staff. He approached with a cautious bow, offering a flood of apologies. Kevin, respectful and unflinching, allowed himself to be escorted away, his eyes briefly catching Lily's. In that fleeting connection, unspoken yet profoundly understood, he signed quietly, "You are perfect exactly as you are." Lily's small smile, shy and tentative, blossomed, illuminating her features in a way Naomi had not witnessed for months. It was subtle, yet radiant, a tiny revolution against neglect and indifference. Naomi's face, once a mask of superiority and control, betrayed confusion, resentment, and a flicker of something she refused to name, admiration for a courage that was not hers to command. Kevin stepped back into the wider space of the restaurant, blending seamlessly with the staff while keeping a careful watch. His mind did not dwell on the confrontation. Instead, it lingered on Lily, the way her eyes had brightened, the slight uptick in her posture, the nascent joy that seemed ready to bloom if only someone nurtured it. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility, not imposed by circumstance, but by choice, a resolve that would not allow another child to be reduced to an accessory of vanity. As Naomi gathered herself, straightened her hair, and settled back with an air of forced composure, she could not erase the image of her daughter's smile from her mind. It lodged itself like a quiet rebuke, a reflection of warmth and connection she had long denied herself. Lily, still adjusting her napkin with small, careful movements, glanced at her mother briefly before returning her attention to the untouched menu. There was no spoken word, no plea, only a small, glimmering assertion of presence, an insistence that she existed beyond Naomi's control, beyond the polished illusions of wealth and appearances. The incident, brief as it was, planted seeds of disruption in Naomi's rigid routines. She could not comprehend fully the significance of what had transpired, the delicate bridge of understanding and acceptance that had been extended to her child by a man she had dismissed as mere servant. And in the quiet as Kevin walked away and the soft murmur of other patrons resumed, Lily's fingers traced an invisible line across the table, a silent echo of gratitude and recognition. For the first time, she had been seen, understood, and met on her own terms, and the tiny, imperceptible swell of hope took root within her, a fragile yet indomitable start. Kevin sat on the weathered wooden bench beneath the broad canopy of an old oak tree, the dappled sunlight creating gentle patterns on the pages of the book he held. The park smelled faintly of wet grass and earth, mingling with the distant aroma of roasted peanuts from a nearby vendor. He relished these quiet moments off duty, when the world seemed to slow just enough to breathe, to observe, to notice the smaller, often overlooked details of life. His older brother Marcus had been deaf since birth, and Kevin had grown up immersed in a language of hands and faces, of subtle shifts in posture and expression. Those lessons had taught him to read more than words. They had taught him to see the currents of emotion that flowed beneath them. As he turned a page, his eyes lifted automatically, scanning the park for movement. That's when he saw her, a little girl in a pink coat, walking with a hesitant grace toward the pond at the center of the park. Her hair shone gold in the sunlight, a halo that contrasted sharply with the intense concentration on her small face. She seemed oblivious to the world, mesmerized by the gentle ripples in the water and the ducks that floated lazily across its surface. Kevin's heart clenched slightly. He knew that coat, that gait, that cautious curiosity. It was Lily. 20 feet away, a young nanny stood scrolling absently on her phone. Her attention fragmented, her presence a formality rather than vigilance. Kevin's pulse quickened, but his movements remained deliberate, measured. There was no panic, no rush, just a steady, controlled approach. He rose from the bench, letting the book fall softly beside him, and walked toward Lily with calm authority. "Ducks are prettier from the grass. Safer too," he signed gently, tapping her shoulder just enough to gain her attention. The little girl's eyes widened, recognition flashing instantly. Her face lit up, a pure, unguarded beam of excitement that seemed to erase the shadows lingering from her mother's constant criticism and indifference. "Look at them. They're swimming together. The yellow one, he's chasing the others." Lily signed rapidly, her small hands moving with energy and enthusiasm, the words tumbling out in a language that was wholly her own, yet completely understandable to Kevin. He nodded, a smile tugging at his lips, and crouched slightly to meet her gaze. The connection was immediate, profound, a bridge of trust forged in an instant, yet rooted in the care Kevin had shown from the first encounter. Then, Naomi appeared. She had stepped away behind a tree to take a call, her voice sharp and insistent at the other end, but now she returned, catching sight of them. Her face twisted in a mixture of disbelief, irritation, and indignation. Her heels clicked sharply on the path as she strode toward them, her posture rigid with authority. "Are you following us?" she hissed, voice trembling with fury. "I'll call the police." Kevin kept his tone calm, even gentle, his expression unflinching. "Ma'am, your daughter was 2 steps from the water. I just kept her safe." His hands rested at his sides, open, non-threatening, conveying more than his words could. A quiet insistence that his actions had been guided solely by care and concern. Naomi's eyes darted to Lily, who now stood between them, small but unyielding. The little girl's gaze, usually so soft and compliant, sharpened with defiance. For the first time, Lily resisted her mother, her tiny hands moving with controlled anger as she signed furiously, words and emotions flowing in a language Naomi could not comprehend. "Come here now!" Naomi snapped, yanking Lily toward her. The girl's feet scraped against the soft grass, her body twisting, pulling against her mother's grip. Kevin stepped closer, not to intervene physically, but to ensure her safety, his eyes meeting Lily's briefly. There was a spark there, a silent conversation, a shared understanding that she was not alone, that someone saw her, that someone cared. As Naomi dragged her daughter away, Kevin felt the familiar ache of helplessness, tempered by the knowledge that he had at least prevented a potential accident. Lily's small hand brushed against his, almost imperceptibly, before she was pulled out of reach. The touch was brief, but in it, there was gratitude, recognition, and the quiet defiance of a child learning her own strength. Kevin returned to the bench, his body tense, his mind already running through the possibilities. He watched as Naomi walked away, her expression tight with anger, her posture rigid with control, yet unaware that something had shifted beneath the surface. Lily had tasted autonomy, however small, and had discovered the presence of someone who would listen, who would understand without judgment. The ducks continued their lazy drift across the pond, the sun reflecting off their wet feathers. A peaceful scene that belied the undercurrents of tension and quiet rebellion. Kevin's eyes followed Lily's retreating figure, noting how her small shoulders were squared ever so slightly, how her steps held a newfound determination. He knew the road ahead would be complicated, fraught with resistance and opposition, but he also knew that moments like this brief, delicate, transformative, were the foundation of change. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, letting the brief connection with Lily settle into his bones. The world could be indifferent, careless, cruel even, but within these small, sacred interactions, there was hope, resilience, and the quiet knowledge that a single act of attention, of care, could alter the course of a life. As the park continued to hum with life, Kevin made a silent promise to himself, and to the little girl who had just reminded him of the power of being seen, that he would not let her be invisible again. No matter the obstacles, no matter the anger and resistance of those who sought to control her, Lily would know that she had allies, that her voice mattered, and that her small hands could shape her world. That night, After the long day's service had finally quieted into the hum of cleaning staff and distant traffic, Kevin lingered in the empty restaurant, feeling the residual weight of the confrontation at the park still pressing against his chest. The laughter and outrage of Naomi Whitmore, so entitled, so unyielding, echoed faintly in his mind, yet it was the sight of Lily's small, radiant smile that kept him anchored, refusing to slip into frustration or anger. The manager, a tall man with perpetually worried eyes, approached Kevin cautiously, his footsteps soft on the polished floor. "Kevin," he began, voice low and measured, "I need to tell you something. Privately." He motioned toward the side office, a small space lit by a single overhead lamp, casting long shadows across stacks of reservation books and menus. Once inside, the manager closed the door behind them and pulled out a folded sheet of paper from his desk drawer. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the unease of bearing information that could escalate quickly. "Her name," he said, almost apologetically, "is Naomi Whitmore. That's the full name from her reservation. I didn't give it lightly. After what happened tonight, I felt you should know." Kevin took the paper with a silent nod, feeling the weight of it in his hands. The name itself carried no immediate threat, no directive. It was simply a fact. He folded the paper carefully, placing it back on the manager's desk. "Thank you," he said quietly, voice steady, though his mind churned with possibilities. But tonight was not the night to act. Tonight, he reminded himself, was for observation, reflection, and careful thought. Patience, he knew, could save more than immediate action ever could. 3 days later, Kevin's quiet routine was interrupted by a ping from his laptop. The email notification glimmered on the screen, a new message, filtered through the restaurant's website contact form. He hesitated, unsure whether to expect a mundane question about catering or reservations. The subject line read simply, "From Lily's iPad." His fingers paused over the keyboard, his heartbeat quickening, his breath catching in his throat. The message was short, unadorned, and devastatingly earnest. "My name is Lily. I use this iPad at school. Mommy doesn't know I have your name from your name tag. Please, can we talk again? I am sad." Kevin's eyes blurred slightly, the words sinking deep into his chest. Each sentence was precise, yet full of longing. A child's plea not just for connection, but for recognition, for understanding. Attached was a photograph, a handwritten note, neat but with small tremors in the letters, and, alongside it, Lily's ASL name sign. Kevin's breath hitched. He recognized the watermark on the corner of the page, the faint, official emblem of the school-issued iPads given to deaf students. These devices were designed to be controlled, to limit unsupervised communication. Yet here was proof that Lily had navigated around parental restrictions. She had done this with subtlety, with intelligence, and with courage far beyond her years. Kevin leaned back in his chair, his mind awash with conflicting emotions. Pride. Yes, there was that swelling quietly in his chest, almost unbearably bright. Astonishment at her ingenuity, her ability to reach out despite barriers carefully constructed by a parent who refused to see her. And a deep, gnawing sadness for the isolation she had endured. The words she could not speak aloud. The thoughts and feelings trapped within her tiny body, crying out through the pixels of an iPad. He reread her message, slow and deliberate, savoring the rhythm of her syntax, the careful choice of words. "I am sad." Such simple words, yet in them lay the weight of months, perhaps years of neglect, frustration, and unspoken longing. Kevin felt the familiar tug of responsibility, the moral compass that had always guided him in moments like this, when a child's trust had been extended into his hands. He placed his hand gently over the photograph, as if touching it could convey the reassurance, the empathy, and the unspoken promise he wanted to give her. "I see you," he whispered to the quiet room, his voice swallowed by the stillness, but meant for her alone. "I understand you, and I will help you." Kevin knew that action had to be measured, precise. There was no room for recklessness, no space for impulses driven solely by emotion. He would need guidance, support, and careful documentation. But for the first time, he realized there was a door ajar, a crack of opportunity through which trust and communication could flow, unobserved, unhindered. Lily had reached across the divide, and she had placed her fragile hope in his hands. The evening deepened outside, the city lights flickering in distant windows, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding below. Kevin stared at the screen, at the words from a 7-year-old girl who had learned to navigate silence and indifference with quiet resilience. He felt both the weight of the responsibility and the spark of possibility. He would not fail her. He could not. For the first time in what felt like a long while, Kevin allowed himself a small, private smile. It was not triumphant, nor was it relief. It was recognition of courage, of connection, of the fragile threads of trust that could be woven between adult and child, between isolation and care. He knew the journey ahead would be delicate, fraught with challenges both emotional and legal. But the first contact had been made. The seed had been planted. And as he closed the laptop gently, Kevin whispered again, almost to himself, almost as a vow to the silent girl who had reached out to him across the quiet space of a screen. "You are not alone, Lily. Not anymore." The next morning, Kevin sat at his small kitchen table, the sunlight slicing across the surface in thin, golden lines. His fingers hovered over the phone, tense and deliberate, before dialing the familiar number of his older brother, Marcus. The air felt heavy with anticipation, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility he now carried. Marcus answered with his usual warmth, his tone calm yet precise, the faint smile audible even over the line. Kevin explained the situation carefully, recounting everything he had witnessed: the park, the ducks, Naomi's indifference, and most importantly, Lily's attempt to reach out through her iPad. Every detail was measured, every word deliberate, so as not to alarm his brother, yet conveying the urgency of the child's emotional state. Marcus listened quietly, the line filled only with the subtle hum of the city outside their respective windows. When Kevin finished, Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of comprehension settling over him. "Kevin," he signed over video, though his hands trembled slightly, betraying the gravity of the situation. Emotional neglect of a deaf child by a hearing parent who refuses to learn sign language is legally reportable here. It is not just neglect. It is a violation of the child's rights to communication and emotional development. We have to proceed carefully, but there is a clear path to protecting her. Kevin felt a surge of relief, tempered by the careful knowledge of what lay ahead. It was a legal and moral roadmap, one that could transform helpless concern into actionable protection. Yet he knew that it had to be handled delicately. Lily was a child of 7, intelligent and cautious. She needed reassurance, not fear. Connection, not coercion. He responded to Lily through her iPad, his words chosen with painstaking care. "I would like to see you, for a short time, at the park. Only 15 minutes, when your nanny usually comes for you. No one else needs to know. We will be safe." There was a pause before the reply came, her digital handwriting neat, but slightly trembling. "Yes, I want to see you." On the agreed day, Kevin arrived early, carrying a small backpack with a tablet and a notebook. The park was quiet, the late afternoon sun stretching shadows across the paths and grass. He found the bench they had shared before and sat, hands folded, eyes scanning the surroundings for both safety and serenity. Marcus accompanied him off-camera, a silent sentinel and mandated reporter, ensuring that the meeting would be above reproach and entirely focused on Lily's safety. When Lily appeared, her pink coat bright against the soft greens and browns of the park, Kevin's chest tightened. She walked with the tentative certainty of a child used to navigating boundaries. Yet there was a spark of anticipation in her steps. She waved to him briefly, then crouched near the bench, her fingers fluttering slightly with the excitement of recognition. Kevin smiled warmly, signing slowly and clearly. "Hello, Lily. I'm happy to see you again. How was your day?" She responded immediately, her hands moving in eager, animated sequences. Kevin noticed the subtle hesitation in her gestures, the careful precision that revealed both her excitement and her lingering wariness. He responded gently, matching her pace, validating each signed word, and reinforcing the unspoken connection between them. Over the next few minutes, they recorded short, gentle videos of Lily signing about her daily life. The camera captured only partial views of her face, at first her hands, her torso. Sometimes the curve of her hair enough to communicate her expressions and words while preserving her safety. She spoke of school, of favorite books, of ducks in the pond, and of small joys that Naomi never acknowledged. Kevin kept his presence calm and supportive, occasionally nodding or giving a thumbs up, reinforcing her confidence in the process. During these sessions, Lily wrote on her iPad, her tiny fingers tapping carefully at the screen. "Daddy is not allowed to see me anymore, and Mommy says he is bad." Each word landed heavily on Kevin's heart. He felt a mixture of sorrow, outrage, and determination. The isolation she endured, the forced misperceptions planted by her mother, weighed upon him as much as the responsibility to respond correctly. Yet in her words, he also saw courage, an almost imperceptible defiance, a refusal to be erased entirely. Marcus observed quietly, his hands moving in soft, subtle signs only Kevin could read, reassuring gestures that communicated presence and support. He reminded Kevin, without words, that this was the foundation, the careful, documented proof of neglect, and more importantly, a record of Lily's own voice asserting itself despite the obstacles. In these brief, supervised meetings, 3 in total, the bond between Kevin and Lily deepened. She learned that he could be trusted, that communication could exist without fear, and that someone could see her, fully and completely, even when her mother could not or would not. Each session left Kevin with a profound sense of purpose, the quiet affirmation that the smallest acts of attention and care could ripple into powerful consequences. At the end of each visit, Lily would wave goodbye, sometimes with a shy grin, sometimes with a wistful frown, but always with a sense of ownership over her own narrative. Kevin would return to his car or to the bench, feeling the heavy mix of sorrow and hope that came with witnessing both the fragility and the resilience of a child. He thought often of the line he had read once in a counseling manual: "The smallest voice, when heard, can change the course of a life." By the third meeting, Lily's confidence had grown visibly. She signed more freely, her gestures more animated, her eyes brighter. Kevin felt the quiet swell of pride, tempered by sadness for all the months she had been silenced and misunderstood. Marcus gave a subtle nod, acknowledging the progress and the courage it had taken. The evidence had been carefully documented, yes, but more importantly, the child had been seen, heard, and validated. Kevin closed the final meeting with a simple sign: "You are brave, Lily. I am proud of you." Her reply, swift and sure, "Thank you for hearing me," lingered in the air, a testament to the power of attention, of care, and of connection. And for the first time, Kevin allowed himself to believe that the steps they had taken, small and measured though they were, could open a path toward protection, justice, and ultimately, healing. Kevin spent the early hours of the morning at his apartment, the soft hum of the city barely reaching his ears as he pored over public records and PACER filings. The glow of the computer screen illuminated his focused expression, the shadows under his eyes betraying the long nights of worry for Lily. His fingers moved steadily over the keyboard, searching for details, dates, filings, any clue that could reveal the depth of the child's situation. Each click, each document he opened carried with it the quiet weight of possibility, the chance to see the truth, the chance to act, and the chance to finally give Lily a voice that had been systematically ignored. Hours passed. Kevin's heart raced as he stumbled upon the first set of sealed custody filings, documents that told a story invisible to the public eye. Years of motions, petitions, and court orders, all meticulously recorded, yet buried beneath layers of legal maneuvering. He scanned the text carefully, motions for visitation, repeated denials, parental claims, and the names of attorneys whose reputations preceded them. Naomi's high-priced legal team had fought ruthlessly, framing David Hart, a meticulous architect and devoted father, as emotionally unstable, painting him as unreliable and dangerous in a court of law. Each filing was a testament to calculated exclusion, a deliberate erasure of a parent's rights, and Kevin felt his stomach twist with both anger and sorrow. David Hart had never missed a single child support payment. Every obligation fulfilled punctually, every legal avenue explored, and yet, for more than 2 years, he had been denied the most fundamental aspect of parenthood: presence. Kevin felt the weight of that absence pressing down on him. He imagined David, unaware, perhaps thinking his daughter was being cared for adequately, trusting Naomi's flawless public image to cover the cracks of her neglect. The thought made his chest ache. The disconnect between public perception and private reality was staggering. Naomi's carefully cultivated image of the perfect mother and socialite shielded her from scrutiny, yet the child's suffering had been mounting in silence, unnoticed by everyone except Kevin, and now, reluctantly, Marcus. Kevin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He thought of Lily, her bright gaze, her small hands signing messages that no adult in her life seemed to understand. Every attempt at communication she had made had been dismissed, ignored, or worse twisted into justification for further control. Kevin's mind wandered to the iPad messages, the gentle requests, the quiet bravery of a child who had learned to circumvent restrictions to reach someone who would see her. Each document he read, each motion he opened, added to the growing tapestry of evidence that David's exclusion had not been accidental, but meticulously orchestrated. Hours turned into a blur as Kevin pieced together the narrative hidden within the pages. He documented the timeline of filings, noting the consistent pattern: motions submitted, hearings attended, requests for visitation denied without consideration of the child's needs. Naomi's attorneys had leveraged every possible argument, portraying her daughter as fragile, delicate, and in need of a singular maternal presence, while failing entirely to acknowledge the emotional starvation and isolation Lily endured. Kevin felt a surge of both fury and resolve. This was more than legal manipulation. It was an assault on Lily's right to love, to care, and to have a parent who could communicate with her fully and without fear. As he dug deeper, Kevin uncovered the meticulous record of David's adherence to his responsibilities. Every payment logged, every attempt at visitation carefully noted, every legal brief filed with precision. David had fought patiently, respectfully, trusting the system to recognize his devotion. All that effort had been systematically dismantled by Naomi's team, leaving him blind to the true state of his daughter's life. Kevin's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through emails, motions, and judgments, the cumulative weight of injustice pressing on him. He paused, staring at the screen, envisioning David's life, the long hours spent designing buildings, balancing work and responsibility. Perhaps imagining his daughter laughing and thriving under Naomi's care, completely unaware of the truth. Kevin felt the sting of empathy, imagining the heartbreak that would come when David learned how deep the neglect had gone, how much his daughter had been deprived of communication, attention, and affirmation from the one parent she could truly connect with. Kevin leaned forward, his eyes scanning every filing with renewed intensity, knowing that the smallest detail could make the difference between a legal breakthrough and another bureaucratic dismissal. He took notes meticulously, cross-referencing each entry with dates, locations, and previous rulings. Patterns emerged: strategic delays, misrepresentations of David's character, and a deliberate obfuscation of Lily's emotional needs. It became clear that Naomi's public facade, the glamorous, flawless socialite, the attentive mother praised at charity events, was a careful mask designed to hide a history of emotional neglect that was anything but benign. By mid-afternoon, Kevin's eyes were tired, yet his determination had hardened into a quiet steel. He understood that knowledge alone was not enough. It had to be transformed into action, carefully, legally, and with the child's welfare as the absolute priority. He imagined David reading the truth, feeling the shock, the sorrow, and ultimately the profound relief of knowing that someone had finally seen the depth of the neglect and was taking steps to protect his daughter. Kevin closed the final PDF with a slow exhale, pressing his palm to his forehead. He felt the weight of the discovery settle into him, not as despair, but as resolve. The evidence was painstakingly clear, and with the proper approach, it could be the key to restoring a child's right to connection, to love, and to a family life undistorted by fear and manipulation. For the first time, Kevin allowed himself a spark of hope that the meticulous uncovering of these records would lead to justice, to reunion, and ultimately to healing for both Lily and her father. As the evening light shifted and the city's hum deepened outside his window, Kevin whispered quietly to the empty room, a vow more to himself than to anyone else. "We will get this right. You will see your father, Lily. You deserve that. And no one, not even Naomi, can take that away forever." Kevin sat in Marcus's office, the faint hum of fluorescent lights blending with the soft rustle of papers. The quiet was comforting, a buffer against the tension that had been coiling in his chest for days. He took a deep breath, fingers curling around the office phone. Today was the day he would reach David Hart, a man who had been kept in the dark about his daughter for almost 2 years. Kevin's mind raced how to convey the truth without shattering the fragile hope that David may have still carried. He dialed David's number, each ring echoing in the empty office like a drumbeat of anticipation. When David answered, his voice was cautious, wary, a professional tone masking what Kevin sensed was vulnerability and exhaustion. "Hello?" Kevin cleared his throat, then gestured toward Marcus, who handed him the tablet set up for video call. "David," Kevin began, voice steady, "I need you to see something. Please, just watch and listen. It's from your daughter." David hesitated. "Who is this?" he asked, suspicion threading through his words. Kevin lifted his hands, signing slowly and clearly, every movement precise and deliberate. "David, your daughter, Lily. She reached out to me because she needed someone to understand her. She used her own words, her own iPad, and now I can show you exactly what she is trying to tell you." David's eyes widened. A lump rose in his throat. "Wait, she contacted you?" Kevin nodded, keeping his expression calm, steady. "Yes, and she told me exactly how she feels. Listen carefully." He replayed the first video from their park sessions, showing Lily signing about her day, about the ducks, about small joys she had experienced without her father. Kevin then signed and spoke the words Lily had written. "Daddy is not allowed to see me anymore. Mommy says he is bad." David's hands trembled, dropping to his lap as if he needed to anchor himself. His shoulders slumped, the first signs of release breaking through the tight veneer he had maintained for so long. Tears welled in his eyes as the weight of the last 22 months descended upon him. He broke down silently, a quiet gasp escaping as emotion he had kept buried so deep finally found a way out. Kevin waited patiently, giving him space, understanding that grief, shock, and disbelief were interwoven in this fragile moment. "I know it's hard," he signed gently. "She misses you, and she wants to be heard. I can help make that happen safely." David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, swallowing hard. I can't believe I haven't seen her all this time. I thought she was being cared for. I trusted her mother." His voice broke and he shook his head. "I never knew how bad it had gotten. Not like this, not emotionally. She's been alone in ways I can't even imagine." Kevin nodded slowly, signing the words for emphasis. "Now you can help, but we must act carefully. There's a legal path forward and timing is crucial." David took a shuddering breath and leaned back, a mixture of despair and determination in his gaze. Her mother, Naomi. She's building an empire on the illusion of perfection. The upcoming charity gala for the Children's Hospital is all a performance, a last desperate attempt to lure in a big investor before the cracks show. I knew her image was maintained, but I had no idea. This is worse than I imagined. Kevin's expression tightened, understanding the stakes. "Then this is our moment, but we have to be strategic. You still have one legal card remaining, the emergency custody motion that has been sitting on the judge's desk for months. It's waiting for what they call new evidence of neglect. The videos we recorded? They are exactly that." David's eyes widened, hope flickering through the storm of his grief. "The videos? You mean the sessions you had with her?" Kevin nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting in a subtle, reassuring smile. Every word, every gesture, every sign, documented safely, ethically, and with witness oversight. Marcus is there as a mandated reporter. The evidence is verifiable, undeniable. It shows the emotional neglect she's endured, how her language has been ignored, how her needs have been dismissed. David ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. I don't know what to say. I never thought I would see her, or know how she's truly been feeling. The betrayal and the neglect. It's almost unbearable to imagine." His voice cracked, and he pressed his forehead to his hand. "But these videos, they could change everything." Kevin nodded, signing gently for emphasis, his expression tender. "They will, but we have to act with precision. One wrong move and Naomi could spin it, delay it, or even attempt to undermine the process. But done correctly, done with care, it can bring your daughter home." David's lips pressed together, determination hardening his features. "Then let's do it. I've been silent for too long. I've trusted systems and people, and they've failed her. But if there's a chance, so if there's even a chance to give her what she deserves, we have to take it. I'll do whatever it takes." Kevin allowed himself a small exhale of relief, knowing that David's resolve was genuine. There was no pretense, no posturing, just a father, finally awake to the reality of his child's suffering, ready to act in her best interest. The weight of those 22 months was immense, but now it had a focus, a purpose, a path forward. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, carefully reviewing what could be presented, how the evidence would be handled, and the timing of the emergency custody motion. Every decision was considered, every step measured to protect Lily and to ensure that the truth could not be misrepresented. Kevin could see the flicker of hope growing in David's eyes, interwoven with the grief that had not yet fully settled. It was raw, real, and profoundly human. As the call ended, Kevin watched David take a deep breath, grounding himself, preparing to face what had been denied to him for so long. The alliance was formed: Kevin, David, Marcus, and most importantly, Lily. They were no longer disparate individuals separated by circumstance and neglect. They were a team, united by care, determination, and the shared goal of restoring a child's voice and family. Kevin sat back in his chair, heart heavy with empathy but buoyed by the spark of possibility. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, confrontations, and emotional storms, but for the first time, there was clarity. Together, they could transform silence into dialogue, neglect into protection, and despair into hope. And in that quiet office, Kevin allowed himself to whisper softly, almost to himself, almost as a prayer. We will get her home. She will be seen, she will be heard, and she will know she is loved. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Marcus's office, casting long, gentle streaks of light across the polished wooden floor. Marcus adjusted his tie, a subtle gesture of preparation, though in truth he felt a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. Today he would speak with Mrs. Eleanor Gable, one of the city's most influential philanthropists and the honorary chair of the upcoming Children's Hospital Gala. Marcus's long-standing professional relationship with Mrs. Gable had always been formal, yet warm. Her grandson, also deaf, had received years of counseling under Marcus's guidance. Their mutual respect was deep, built on trust and shared commitment to the well-being of children. Yet today's conversation carried a weight neither of them had ever faced. Marcus reviewed the key points he would convey, careful to maintain ethical boundaries. Lily's identity had to remain protected initially, as revealing it prematurely could have legal and social repercussions. He rehearsed the words silently, ensuring that his voice, tone, and gestures conveyed only the necessary information, leaving space for Mrs. Gable to process the gravity of the situation on her own terms. Kevin sat nearby, quietly observing, his hands folded, his gaze steady yet soft, reflecting the responsibility they carried. When Mrs. Gable arrived, she was her usual composed self, radiant in a tailored navy ensemble that spoke of authority tempered with elegance. Her eyes, however, hinted at curiosity and concern as Marcus welcomed her into his office. "Thank you for meeting with me," he began, his voice calm yet deliberate. "I wanted to discuss a matter regarding the upcoming gala, one that involves the welfare of a child." Mrs. Gable's brow furrowed slightly, the first hint of unease crossing her refined features. "A child?" she asked, her tone both inquisitive and cautious. "I'm very invested in the gala, of course, but I'm not sure I understand." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. "The situation involves a child under the care of one of the gala's key contributors. For ethical and legal reasons, I cannot disclose her identity fully at this stage. However, I can share that she is experiencing neglect and emotional isolation due to a lack of accessible communication from her primary caregiver. We have documentation verified through professional channels of her attempts to communicate and the emotional impact of her circumstances." Mrs. Gable's eyes softened slightly, her attention sharpening as Marcus described the situation with measured care. She listened intently, absorbing the significance of each detail. Kevin remained silent, understanding the importance of letting Marcus lead the conversation, of allowing Mrs. Gable to comprehend the situation without distraction. As Marcus elaborated on the supervised sessions and the videos capturing the child's expressions, her eyes widened, the weight of comprehension settling over her like a physical presence. "Videos?" she echoed, her voice catching slightly. "Documented evidence of neglect?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "Yes, we have 3 sessions recorded, all ethically supervised, showing the child signing about her daily experiences, the isolation she faces, and her desire to communicate with her father. The content is sensitive, and her identity is protected in all but the most crucial frames." Mrs. Gable's hands tightened slightly around the edge of her chair, her jaw firming as the reality sank in. "And you're telling me that this child is connected to the gala's chairwoman?" she asked, her tone a mixture of shock and disbelief. Marcus nodded again, noting the ethical implications of her reaction. Her face paled slightly, and she exhaled slowly. This is horrifying," she whispered, almost to herself. "To think that a child, under the public eye of such influence, could be experiencing neglect. And yet, the videos, they prove it." She leaned forward, her fingers brushing over the tablet Marcus offered. She watched carefully, observing the child's small, precise movements, the innocence of her attempts to communicate, and the quiet bravery that shone through the screen. Her breath hitched as she signed softly under her own breath, the words carrying a mix of grief and resolve. By the end of the viewing, Mrs. Gable's expression was one of unwavering determination. This child. She cannot remain in this situation, not for another day, she said firmly. And if this means intervening at the gala itself, then we will do so with careful planning. She must be protected, and her father must be given the opportunity to act. Marcus exhaled, relief mingling with cautious hope. Kevin stepped forward, signing and speaking softly, confirming the next steps, the importance of discretion, and the plan to ensure that the child's welfare would be prioritized without public exposure until the right moment. Mrs. Gable nodded, absorbing each detail, her mind already strategizing how to leverage her influence ethically and effectively. After a long pause, she straightened, her face resolute. "We will act immediately," she said. "I will purchase a table for 10 under my foundation's name. Kevin and the child's father will be my personal guests. No sneaking in, no complications. They will have full access, and I will ensure that the gala proceeds with both discretion and accountability." Kevin allowed a quiet sigh of relief, feeling the tension in his shoulders release slightly. The weight of uncertainty had lifted just enough to allow a glimpse of hope. David, he knew, would soon have a path forward, supported by someone whose influence could counterbalance Naomi's public image. Mrs. Gable continued, her voice steady and commanding. "We cannot allow this child to be overshadowed by the facade of wealth or status. The gala, while public, will become a stage for truth and protection, not for performance. I will see to it personally." As the meeting concluded, Marcus and Kevin exchanged subtle glances. They had anticipated resistance, the need for careful negotiation. Yet Mrs. Gable's swift decisiveness exceeded expectations. The alliance was solidified, her influence, their evidence, and David's resolve converging toward a single goal: the protection and reunion of a child with her rightful parent. Kevin left the office with a renewed sense of purpose, the weight of responsibility now coupled with tangible support. The plan was no longer theoretical. It was actionable. A single, strategic intervention at the gala could shift the trajectory of a child's life from neglect and isolation to recognition, care, and reunion. And for the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine Lily's smile, bright, unburdened, and finally seen illuminating not just a room, but the lives of everyone determined to protect her. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each light reflecting off polished marble floors and gilded columns, creating a world of opulence and celebration. Guests in evening gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled, clinking glasses, exchanging polite smiles and practiced laughter. The air was perfumed with floral arrangements, and the soft strains of a string quartet wove through the hum of conversation. It was a night meant for grandeur, for showcasing generosity, and for performing social grace. And Naomi Whitmore, radiant in a champagne-colored gown, stood at the center of it all, the picture of poised elegance. Her delicate hands clutching the microphone as she accepted praise for raising a special needs child alone. Her lips quivered, her eyes glistened with meticulously timed tears, and her smile shone like a practiced mask. Every observer saw devotion, strength, and maternal perfection except for a few who knew the quiet, hidden truths beneath the polished surface. Kevin, seated at Mrs. Gable's table with David Hart beside him, watched Naomi carefully. His expression was calm, but the tightness in his jaw revealed the intensity of his anticipation. David's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, a quiet storm of emotions building inside him, anger, fear, sorrow, and hope, all tangled together. He had imagined this moment countless times in the solitude of his own home, envisioning the confrontation that would finally allow his daughter's voice to be heard, and yet the reality was almost overwhelming in its magnitude. The room was vast, every guest a potential witness, every light a spotlight. But this was no longer about grandeur or performance. It was about truth, about a child who deserved to be seen and heard. The open mic portion of the program began, with Naomi's name announced for a brief speech. She rose, adjusting her gown and letting her practiced tears glisten, softening her voice as she addressed the audience. "It has been an honor to raise my daughter alone, to nurture her growth, to face challenges that many cannot imagine," she said. Her words met with polite applause and approving nods. The audience, unfamiliar with the hidden neglect, saw only the narrative she had constructed, devoted, loving, flawless. At that precise moment, David felt a surge of determination course through him. He rose from Mrs. Gable's table, every movement deliberate, measured, commanding attention without aggression. His gaze locked onto Naomi, who paused mid-sentence, sensing the shift in the room's energy. The microphone carried his calm yet piercing words across the hall. "Naomi, can you explain to this room why you've spent over $180,000? Keeping me from my daughter for 2 years while claiming to be her sole caregiver?" The room fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by the faint click of phones raised instinctively to record the confrontation. Murmurs of confusion and curiosity spread as the tension thickened, and Naomi's perfectly orchestrated performance wavered, her lips tightening and her eyes darting in search of support. She opened her mouth, attempting to interject, to redirect the narrative, to protect the facade she had cultivated for years. But before she could regain control, Mrs. Gable herself rose from her chair. Her presence was commanding, her authority palpable. She approached the stage with purposeful steps, taking the microphone from the MC with a firm, deliberate motion. "I asked the AV team to cue a short video from one of the children this gala claims to help," Mrs. Gable said, her voice carrying clearly over the room, both calm and authoritative. A collective hush fell over the audience as the lights dimmed, its crystal chandeliers casting soft reflections across the now quiet hall. The massive screen at the front flickered to life, and the first frame revealed a small, neutral room, calm, simple, and intentionally unobtrusive. Sitting at a child-sized table was Lily, her pink coat now replaced with a soft sweater, her hair neatly framing her face. For the first time, her full face was visible to an audience that had never truly seen her. A face that carried innocence, bravery, and the quiet resilience of a child longing to be heard. Lily began signing slowly, deliberately, with clarity that belied her tender age. Marcus's certified interpreter voiceover translated every word in real time, ensuring the audience understood both her literal statements and the emotional weight behind them. "My name is Lily. I am 7. My mommy says she loves me on TV, but at home she never looks at me. She never learned my language. I just want someone to talk to me." Her small hands moved with precision, each sign a plea, each expression a revelation of neglect and isolation that Naomi's curated appearances could never convey. A quiet sob escaped somewhere in the room, a subtle but undeniable human reaction to the raw honesty of a child's words. Kevin felt his throat tighten as he watched Lily, so small, yet so courageous, reach across the gulf of silence to communicate her truth. David's hand rose instinctively, brushing a tear from his cheek as the reality of his daughter's experiences crystallized before him, undeniable and painfully vivid. Lily's final line, delivered with tears rolling down her cheeks, struck the room with devastating clarity. "Daddy, when can I come home?" The words echoed in the cavernous hall, reverberating in the hearts of every person present. Some shifted uncomfortably, confronted with the contrast between Naomi's public image and the reality of her daughter's suffering. Others fumbled for words, their polite applause stilled by the undeniable weight of truth. Naomi's composure shattered entirely. Her hand trembled on the microphone, her eyes wide, face pale as she stammered, attempting to frame the situation as a hack, a setup, something beyond her control. I don't. This is impossible, she cried, her voice cracking, revealing fear and desperation that no amount of social polish could mask. Mrs. Gable stepped closer, her presence firm and unyielding. "No, Naomi," she said evenly, her tone resolute and deliberate. "My foundation is withdrawing all present and future support. Effective immediately." Her words cut through the room like a clear bell, final and authoritative. Phones continued to capture every moment. The scene unfolding live across social media, the story already rippling outward to the world beyond the ballroom walls. Kevin watched David rise to his full height, his face a mixture of resolve and relief. The child's voice had been amplified, the truth revealed, and the first steps toward justice had been taken. As Lily signed again, small but confident, Kevin felt the energy shift not just in the room, but in the lives of those who had waited, unseen, for this moment of recognition, for this affirmation that even in silence, the smallest voices could resonate with power, clarity, and undeniable truth. The aftermath of Lily's video rippled through the gala ballroom like a silent tidal wave, leaving every attendee suspended in disbelief. The chandeliers above cast fractured reflections across the polished marble floor, their light catching on crystal glasses and sequin-embellished gowns, turning the room into a kaleidoscope of shocked faces. Conversation had completely ceased. Even the string quartet had faltered mid-note, unsure whether to continue under the weight of the moment. Naomi Whitmore, standing frozen near the podium, seemed smaller than her elegant frame should have allowed. Her carefully constructed image splintered in real time before the entire city's elite. The applause she had expected, the sympathetic nods she had relied upon, the murmurs of admiration, all of it had vanished, replaced by the raw and unflinching truth that could not be erased. Her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone, her knuckles whitening. Her eyes, wide and frantically searching for support, darted toward familiar faces, acquaintances who had always deferred to her social authority. I've been hacked. I've been set up," she cried, her voice rising into a shrill pitch that betrayed panic more than indignation. Her tears, once calculated and staged, now flowed freely and unevenly, streaking her carefully applied makeup into chaotic lines down her cheeks. She pointed a shaking finger toward Kevin, her accusation piercing the stunned silence. "That waiter did this! He orchestrated this humiliation." The room held its collective breath, the tension almost palpable, a taut string ready to snap. Guests whispered behind gloved hands, some leaning toward their companions in disbelief, others silently recording the spectacle. The air felt dense, electric with the collision of status, deception, and revelation. Kevin, standing just a few feet from Naomi, felt the tension coiling around him like a living thing, but he remained composed. His jaw was set, his eyes steady and unwavering. There was no anger in his gaze, only calm determination and the quiet validation of having acted out of necessity and care. He did not flinch at her accusation. He did not raise his voice in protest. The truth, he knew, carried its own weight, and it did not need defense. From the side of the stage, Mrs. Eleanor Gable moved forward, her steps measured and deliberate, her posture commanding yet graceful. Her eyes, steel-sharp behind the faint softness of age and experience, settled on Naomi with unyielding focus. She held the microphone with certainty, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel, precise and absolute. "No, Naomi," she said, each word deliberate and measured. "This is not the result of any hack or malicious act by anyone else. I did this. My foundation is withdrawing all present and future support, effective immediately. The room's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, the impact of Mrs. Gable's words resonating like a bell tolling for finality. Gasps spread through the crowd as the enormity of the decision sank in. The murmurs were louder now, not of admiration, but of astonishment and acknowledgement. The powerful hand of accountability had fallen squarely where it belonged. Reporters, strategically positioned throughout the ballroom, had begun capturing every frame, live streaming the confrontation. Typing rapid updates into social media feeds, the story erupting across the city and beyond before Naomi could even comprehend the scope of the exposure. Naomi's face contorted with disbelief and rage. Her carefully curated persona, polished through years of public appearances and social maneuvering, could not withstand the sudden collapse of her narrative. She attempted to speak again, her words tripping over themselves, half-formed accusations and desperate denials spilling from her lips. But the authority of Mrs. Gable's presence silenced her, and the room collectively absorbed the weight of what had transpired. Her hands flailed briefly, clutching at the microphone as though she could physically reclaim the control that had slipped from her grasp. Yet nothing she did could alter the reality now displayed before the world. Guests, some still holding champagne flutes, looked around uncertainly, processing the spectacle of power, deception, and the unfiltered consequences of truth. A few reached instinctively for their phones, capturing images and video to preserve the event that would undoubtedly become a defining moment in social and philanthropic circles. Social media feeds began to light up, the story of Naomi Whitmore's carefully constructed image colliding violently with the reality of her neglect. Hashtags formed almost instantly, spreading like wildfire. Hashtag LILLYS voice, hashtag truth at the gala, hashtag Naomi Whitmore exposed. The network of influence and reputation she had relied upon was unraveling in real time, each digital echo amplifying the fallout. Kevin remained silent, though inside he felt a profound mix of emotions. Relief and apprehension mingled with a quiet joy. The child he had promised to protect, the daughter who had been so isolated and silenced, had finally been heard. Every deliberate step, every careful recording and consultation, every moment of patience and strategy had led to this instant, a truth revealed without violence, without malice, only clarity and justice. David, seated beside him, exhaled shakily, his eyes glistening with tears as he witnessed the culmination of months of waiting, frustration, and heartache. The injustice he had endured, the pain of missing his daughter's presence in countless moments, was now acknowledged openly and publicly. And for the first time in nearly 2 years, the path toward reunion had been paved in light and transparency. Naomi's protests grew shriller, her voice unsteady, teetering on the edge of hysteria. Staff members moved toward her, gentle but firm, guiding her away from the stage, their hands on her elbows to prevent any sudden outburst. Each step she took toward the exit was a reminder of the collapse of the carefully constructed world she had inhabited. Cameras and phones followed her every movement, capturing the unraveling spectacle with unflinching clarity. By the time she was escorted from the ballroom, the story was already breaking nationwide, headlines forming even before she had reached the safety of her car. The narrative she had tried to control was now in the hands of witnesses, journalists, and most importantly, the truth. Kevin allowed himself a deep breath, feeling the weight of tension slowly lift. The room, still buzzing with the energy of shock and revelation, began to process the consequences of accountability and courage. A child's voice, once silent and isolated, had resonated across the room and into the wider world, demanding attention, recognition, and care. In that quiet, the possibilities for healing and reconnection began to take root. Fragile, but undeniable, and the path toward a brighter, more just future for Lily was finally within reach. 6 months had passed since the gala, a period that felt simultaneously long and impossibly brief to those who had lived through its aftermath. The city had buzzed with stories of Naomi Whitmore's exposure, her fall from carefully curated grace now firmly cemented in the public record. Yet, for David Hart, the months had been measured not in headlines or whispers, but in the quiet, tender steps toward reconnecting with the daughter he had missed for nearly 2 years. The emergency custody hearing, bolstered by Kevin's meticulously gathered videos, Marcus's detailed and compassionate testimony, and Mrs. Eleanor Gable's sworn affidavit, had provided a decisive legal resolution. Within weeks, the judge had granted David full custody, acknowledging the depth of neglect and the urgency of repairing the fractured bond between father and child. Relief had washed over David in waves, though tinged with the lingering pain of the years' lost moments that could never be recovered, but which could now be honored and rebuilt with intention and love. The first day at home with Lily was a kaleidoscope of emotions. Her cautious smile, tentative and unsure at first, had gradually transformed into laughter that echoed through the hallways of their renewed life together. Each small act, holding hands, shared meals, bedtime stories in SL, was a quiet miracle, a reclamation of time stolen, yet not entirely lost. David often found himself paused in the hallway, watching Lily explore her surroundings, signing with a vocabulary of joy and curiosity, and marveling at her resilience. She was more than the sum of neglect and isolation. She was a spark, a light that demanded to be seen, heard, and nurtured. Kevin, ever present but unobtrusive, continued to guide the healing process. His presence had become a steady anchor for both David and Lily, offering reassurance without intrusion, teaching without pressure, and validating without judgment. His faith in the quiet power of communication had been unwavering, and now, seeing Lily flourish, it was tangible proof of what care, patience, and understanding could achieve. He had never sought recognition, but the satisfaction of witnessing her reclaim her voice and agency was reward enough. Recognizing the broader need in the community, Kevin, supported by seed money from Mrs. Gable's foundation and pro bono architectural plans generously offered by David, had begun building a dream that had taken shape slowly, thought by careful thought. Signs of Hope Community Center opened its doors as a free drop-in space, offering ASL classes for families, counseling for children and parents alike, and structured playgroups designed to foster connection, expression, and trust. Every corner of the center was infused with warmth, intention, and accessibility, bright colors that didn't overwhelm, wide hallways for wheelchairs and mobility aids, sensory-friendly spaces for children who required calm, and signs everywhere encouraging communication in all forms. The center was not merely a facility. It was a declaration that every child, every family, had the right to be understood and heard. On the morning of the grand opening, the building thrummed with anticipation. Families arrived nervously, carrying backpacks, strollers, and the quiet weight of uncertainty, parents unsure if their children would feel safe, children hesitant to trust the world again. Lily, however, was radiant. She ran through the bright halls with exuberance, her small hands moving in animated signs, each gesture full of energy and confidence. Her laughter rang out, mingling with the excited chatter of other children exploring new toys, sensory stations, and reading nooks. She paused only briefly, spotting Kevin near the doorway, his welcoming smile steady and kind. Without hesitation, she barreled into him, throwing her arms around him in a hug that was both exuberant and profoundly sincere. Kevin knelt to meet her at eye level, feeling the warmth of her embrace and the lightness of her trust. His fingers moved fluidly, communicating through the language that had bridged the divide between them from the very first encounter. "Look at you, loud and proud without making a sound," he signed, his expression reflecting pride, affection, and quiet awe at her growth. Lily grinned broadly, the corners of her eyes crinkling, her hands answering in kind with the simplicity and honesty of a child who finally felt safe and acknowledged. "Thank you for hearing me," she signed back, her words carrying the weight of gratitude, relief, and joy. It was more than politeness, it was recognition, validation, and a celebration of being fully seen. As Kevin straightened, he glanced toward the entrance where a new family lingered, hesitation etched on their faces. He moved toward them with open hands, fingers flowing in welcome, signaling patience and understanding. "Come in," his expression invited, warm and steady. "You are safe here." Behind him, the sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating the space like a promise. The children who had already arrived played with confidence, exploring, laughing, and signing freely. The parents began to relax, their shoulders easing as they witnessed the simple, profound power of communication and connection. Throughout the day, Kevin moved among the families, offering guidance, answering questions, and gently encouraging those who were shy or uncertain. The air was thick with optimism, tempered by the understanding that healing was a process, but also infused with hope, the kind that took root slowly, nurtured by patience, empathy, and trust. Each interaction was a reminder of what had been accomplished, a child's voice reclaimed, a family reunited, and a community given the tools to communicate, care, and grow together. By late afternoon, as the sunlight softened and the laughter of children began to meld with quiet moments of reflection, Kevin paused at the doorway once more. He observed Lily signing with a new friend, their hands moving with joy and clarity, her earlier apprehension replaced with confidence. He allowed himself a small, contented smile, knowing that this center, this day, and this new chapter were only the beginning of something enduring. The ripple effect of care, empathy, and justice would extend far beyond these walls, touching families who had never before been seen or heard. And as the doors remained open to all who sought understanding, to every parent and child searching for connection, Kevin turned to the camera of the small promotional video being made for the center and signed directly to the audience. "Every voice deserves to be heard. Every child deserves to be seen. Join us, learn, connect, and let us hear your story." Fade out on Kevin greeting the next nervous family at the door, hands already moving in welcome. The sunlight catching the edges of the room and casting a golden glow over hope realized, futures bright, and new beginnings unfolding. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories of courage, resilience, and the power of human connection.